Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we are taking a look at McFarlane's Monsters, Series 2, the Twisted Land of Oz series, and this is the Scarecrow. Scarecrow comes with part 4 and 5 of the Twisted Land of Oz story, and he's an interesting one. As with any of these figures, he's more of a statue than anything else, but this guy has so many parts to plug into him. I think I spent the better part of half an hour trying to figure out where all the parts on this guy go. And at the end of it all, I have this stick that I have no clue where the heck it goes. Now, as I mentioned in my first review of this series, I'd gotten basically 2 full sets of these figures. I had one in box and one out of the box. Which the ones out of the box were in such pristine condition that they were still in the plastic tray from the box. So they might as well have been boxed figures. The only 2 exceptions is I did not get a unboxed Toto, and the Scarecrow was basically missing. I had his base, I had his crows, I had his pumpkins, I had his pitchfork, I had his severed head. I did not have the Scarecrow. I actually had one of his legs. I had extra leg. But for whatever reason, he must have broken or something, so I only got his accessories and not the figure itself. Fortunately, here where I live, there is a really cool store that sells old action figures. Mostly out of package, though they have some box stuff. But I went down there, and for a couple bucks, the guy sold me this Scarecrow because his foot had broken. It was a simple matter of super gluing it, which took 5 minutes. He had no accessories, but I had the accessories, so it worked out perfectly for me. I'm only missing one piece of this guy's puzzle. Now, if I bring in the boxed figure, I'm bringing in the boxed figure. I think that's happened once before on this channel. Imagine that. But you can see in the background, kinda, sort of, there is a scythe. You can see right in here in the back, there's a scythe. That's the one thing I am lacking with this guy, so no scythe in this review, unfortunately. Now, the Scarecrow is a little more statuesque than the other ones, because I'm afraid to take him apart and show you all the pieces individually, so I'm going to mention that he has his base here, very similar to the ones that come with the other figures. Once again, I said they reused some of the same bases over and over. I have his 1 foot pegged in there, his straw foot. He has pumpkins that actually peg into his foot, though not very well, so the pumpkins are sitting there. It's kind of a nice touch because if you did have this guy without the base, this would probably help him stand. See, he has his kind of normal Scarecrow leg, all the sticks and straw coming out the bottom, going up into the pants. We have one of these zombie crows on his leg there. They all peg into him in different ways, shapes, and forms. His knee's kind of back bent, and he has a stick coming down the ground. This also would help him stand without the base because it scrapes the ground. His other leg, he actually has a boot down here with some kind of twigs and almost looks like farm equipment up around the upper part. Now, looking at the one in package, there's supposed to be some extra stuff down here, but since mine was broken, that stuff was missing, so there's some additional piping, I believe, that goes in this section of the figure, but nothing that's going to be missed too severely, I don't think. But I do like the way this all looks mechanical, like he took farm equipment to rebuild his leg, which is pretty neat. We have another zombie crow. As I mentioned before, we don't have his scythe, but we do have his pitchfork, which is really cool. It's got a good bend on it. It just looks really wicked and homemade and nasty. Pretty cool accessory. It doesn't really sit in his hand too well, though. I don't know if the scythe would have fit better. But this just kind of rests in his hand, which is a little lame. He doesn't really hold it with any force. Though in the story they do mention that he has these weapons and stuff that he can't really lift because his body's so emaciated and weak. Down on his hand here we have the first of several railroad spikes going into his hand, which is really cool, neat touch. And as you're watching the review, you're probably going to see these crows come and go off of him because they fall out at the drop of a hat. He has a stick that goes through his body, comes out the other shoulder. His hand's wrapped around it, more railroad spikes holding that down, probably pinning it to the stick. He has a severed head and spinal column, once again looking like something out of Predator of the Corn. It's a dead guy's head with corn shoved down his throat, and the bloody end of it wrapped around his stick. Kind of neat looking. I don't know how it's holding on there, but, you know, whatever. I do love the way the body looks on this guy, that it's flesh, but it's stitched up, and there's straw inside of it coming out, and it's just emaciated and warped. Really a neat look. This jacket is a softer, rubbery piece, so it can be a little bit pliable, even though he doesn't really have the articulation to justify it. It could have been sculpted and not really been a big deal. His head, if you could see past the two other zombie crows eating it, is kind of in some medieval torture device. It's sucking up the top of his head. Let's see a little better from the side here. It's got like the very top of his bald head and is like twisting it up. It says in the story that it's some kind of lobotomy device. I don't really know how that would give you a lobotomy if it's not really connected to your brain. It's just pulling on your skin, but whatever. It looks gruesome. He also has very messed up teeth, and one of his eyes is a button. The other one's recessed into his head, which is kind of neat looking. As far as articulation, he's pretty limited. This arm will swivel. The wrist will rotate. Just barely. Is really hindered by the sleeve, and there goes another crow. The head will rotate, but it has this device that goes down onto his back, and that keeps it from actually really rotating. It will really hinder any attempts to rotate his head, because it's just going to stop or tear out the extra pieces. The rubber piece itself will rotate a little bit. Mine was actually way too off to the side, so when I put this crow on it, it actually was covering his face and you couldn't see him at all, so you have to maybe mess with that if you get a used one. Also down here at his back bent knee, he does have a rotation point. Once again, not going to mess with it because I just don't want to deal with putting this guy all back together again. The Scarecrow's really a hard one to categorize for me. I like him. I like the sculpt on him. He really extends past his base. He's probably takes up the most room of any of the normal kind of figures in this line. He's got a lot of stuff going for him. He's got all the accessories. He has 2 different weapons if you actually have the weapons, unlike me. He's got his pumpkin scenery. He's got a billion crows. He's got the severed head. His legs are all weird and wild. I love the sculpting on the chest itself. I don't know. He's really hard to call because I don't like the statuesque guys. I really don't. It's a problem I've always had with McFarlane stuff, but I feel like I can't judge McFarlane stuff on that trait alone. So, you know what? I'm going to recommend him. As I said, I got the figure itself, minus the accessories, used for like $2. I actually didn't really have anybody to spend on figures, and I was kind of able to justify that just for the fact that that's dirt cheap. I had all the accessories, so that made me lucky. I honestly think this guy's probably one of the cheaper ones to come by in this line, because I don't think he's all that much sought after. But I'm going to recommend him. I think he's pretty cool, honestly, and I think he's worth picking up, but he's just twisted as the Twisted Land of Oz should be. It's been another Outside the Box review. Stay tuned for more to come.